scooter again. A few days ago I changed the tires on my scooter, went out for a drive and found this in the middle of the road. It's an old German Soviet type of radio. It's called the Sternrekorder R160. Yeah, for those who understand German. But yeah, I was curious, this looks like some really nice funky old wooden stereo. It's from the 70s or so. And I'm curious if it works or not. There were a few buttons missing. Also, there's a plastic flap missing here on the side where you stick your power lead in, and I had to trim this power cord down since the plug is a little bit different. You can see that, yeah, it's been beaten up. There's a piece of wood missing here. The entire plastic top here is not held on. There's a metal connecting piece from this thing lying, and then the whole entire assembly up here is at an angle. So someone had a real, I don't know, maybe they were frustrated about trying to fix it, or they just decided to throw this thing out in the most violent way possible. Well, I had a look in it and everything looked fine, nothing looked visually broken, but there was no sound coming out of it. So I checked the cable from the speaker and saw, I don't know if you'll see that the cable was actually had snapped in half. The tape mechanism is a bit weird and the tape doesn't want to fit in there properly. I can show you what I mean. Just have a 1 kilohertz calibration tape here, and you see you have to like hold it in and whatever like that. And let's see if it will actually work. So yeah, we get a 1 kilohertz wave. You can hear that's kind of fluctuating, but hey, for a tape recorder that has been probably out in the street rain and whatnot for a few days, that's actually really good. For the radio, however, that's where one of the knobs were missing, and the entire tuner assembly is completely stuck. You can hear that it's kind of stuck in between two stations, and if I try to adjust the capacitor in there, I can't. It's completely stuck. Now you can already tell that this thing has been very nicely constructed. We have an actual hinge in it that allows us to open the entire unit and have a look inside. We have our tape mechanism all the way there, and everything that's necessary for the speaker and radio is on this side. The tuning capacitor is over here, and you can see that quite a few of the plastic pieces have cracked, which are supposed to hold everything in. Alright, so we are in. I should be able to pull out the antenna now. Can't even see what I'm doing. Just get some better access to this capacitor here. So yeah, well, itself it actually appears to be loose. You can kind of move it, but there is no way for me to rotate it. So let's go in there with some WD-40 and see if that helps, and hopefully that will be able to loosen it up. And what I could do is try and somehow attempt to get the entire capacitor out of there, if there's even a possibility of doing that without, yeah, I don't know. The entire assembly is kind of weird, so I'll just try and loosen this thing up. Maybe I will actually remove this, just so I can get access to the shaft of the thing. But yet again, I'm kind of bit worried that I'll just mess up everything on here. So I guess my best option is just to put tape around here so none of the wires come loose or what. Or just quickly take some very detailed pictures of how this piece of string goes onto the entire assembly. This thing is completely stuck, and the screw has actually made quite some impressive scratches into it. That's all kinda rusty and seized. I'll try some stuff and then report back. Well, some time has passed and I've actually figured out you can just remove the entire gear assembly in here. can manage to get it through the plastic opening. And my attempt with WD-40 did actually work. It did manage to free itself a little bit again, but also not very much. Damn. Yeah, it's really stuck in there. So I guess whatever grease was in here either has hardened up, or over time it just got stuck. If the metal deformed itself, which I kinda doubt. But yeah, I'm gonna clean this up, sand it down a tiny little bit, and then put it back in. And the gear is made out of plastic. That's a bit of a surprise. I didn't expect that. Huh. But okay. I mean, it held for way over 30 years. I think this thing was made in 74 or so. I'm not sure, but I have to check the date code on one of the chips or so. One of the components in here. And yeah, I mean, if they held that long, it's probably still gonna outlast this thing. Since there's some wear on it, but it's kind of minimal, and it's mostly from the gear with the spring on it. So I doubt that that's gonna cause any issues anytime soon. And really, you could just replace the entire capacitor with a new one if you really wanted to, or just put a completely different, much newer in it. Oh, and it spins freely again. There's still a bit of give in it, or not give, but a little bit of stickiness. Just gonna use some sandpaper. I think this is 120 grit or so. Kind of rough, but should still be okay. I'm just gonna go over it very gently. And I mean, you can already see that there's a lot of wear on it, and that's probably the areas where it got stuck. Let's see. Yeah, the sandpaper is a bit, maybe not the right thing for this task, but let's do this one. Oh, that is so much better already. So it just needed very little bit of sanding. That is much smoother. It definitely requires some lubricant. It still gets a little bit stuck on some places. So I'm just gonna sand it some more. Oh damn, that is so much better. There's no lubricant in there, and it does not get stuck at all. So yeah, I'd say I'll put that back in there and see if it makes any change whatsoever. So yeah, I actually got the tuner of this thing to work again. That whole trick with the WD-40 and sanding worked really nicely, and I can actually now move everything in the way it's supposed to be. Kind of hard to show, but there we go. Everything is moving and everything's tuning. The only issue is I've accidentally, when I was working on this, shorted out a potentiometer in here, which is that one. And supposedly, with taking a look at the schematic of this thing, which is that one right here, I am not exactly sure, but I either destroyed this one, or that one, or this one. So yeah, I'm just gonna remove these three and make sure that they're still fine, or find the one that has been broken. I'm kind of sure that this is this one, since this goes directly to it, but it could also be one of the others. So, I have actually already desoldered one of them. I can pull it out of the circuit board right now, and there it is. Now, I haven't actually checked what type of transistor this is, because it's kinda hard. I mean, these are parts from the 1970s, and the way they look and everything is a bit different. There we go, it's all in focus. But you can definitely still find something like this. Now this is a component tester. I made a small video about building one of these, and I'd highly suggest that anyone who does something with like small DIY projects, or in general DIY projects, that you get yourself one of these. They're pretty inexpensive, and you get a nice soldering kit as well. So, you just pop the transistor in there, turn the power on, and let's see if it shows up as a transistor or as an on part. And it shows up as a diode. Okay. So now I have to verify with a different transistor in here to see if it can even detect that. But this could also already be a hint that something has gone wrong. Alright, and I did test some other transistors in here, and they all show a positive result. So that thing showing up as a diode was a clear indication that this transistor here is dead. And that, of course, is that one here. It got probably also way too high voltage, so yeah. But hey, at least I found it. Now I have to figure out what I can use as a replacement, or if I even have something at home right now that I can use. So, damn, it's so fucking hard to find any information on that transistor. I couldn't find anything, but I guess it's just an NPN transistor, but I have no idea what kind of transistor I'm supposed to use. So I just put in a random one. Well, I had to actually search for one because the only NPN transistor I have are like these high power ones. So those are of course not gonna work with this. So I got the other idea. Whoa. I have a scrap circuit board of some crappy Chinese amplifier that I no longer use, and it's just been lying around, and hey, there are a bunch of transistors on there. So I snatched one from there, tested it. Oh, it's an NPN transistor, and now it's in there with the correct polarity and everything and whatnot. Ah, scary. So I've set that potentiometer to about half, just to make sure. I hope that's okay. I don't know. And let's power the thing on. Oh, current is still the same as before. Let's turn up some volume and press play on the tape. Damn it. Oh. We have audio again. That is nice. Does the radio also work? That does sound like the radio is working. Let's see if I can. Yeah. That's also working. Nice. So yeah, despite me doing something stupid and killing a transistor in this thing, at least fixing the issue was pretty easy. The radio all functional again, and still me blowing up a transistor. Well, now we're getting to the interesting part, and like I said before, I want to do a full restoration of this thing, and if we take a look at the paint or varnish that's on this thing, it doesn't look that good actually. It could be really better. I mean, especially on the radio itself, and not just the back panel. You can see that, well, it's still okay, but I mean, it could be better, and it has like, yeah, I mean, this area down here, and a bunch of other areas. There are some cracks in here as well, and yeah, it just doesn't look that nice anymore. And since I've never done something like this before, I thought, hey, why not try that out and actually put some new varnish on there and just sand off the old one. Oh, I mean, after I've done the test area here, I just sanded away some of the existing varnish on the back side. This is the back side, so no one's going to look at it. So it really doesn't matter if there are some sanded spots on it. Now for this, you need some sandpaper. You can do it in 2 steps, but I'm just going to use 180 grit sandpaper and go over this real quick, just to get rid of all the old stuff on here and make a nice, even, smooth surface where this varnish is gonna be applied to. Now when working with wood, you have to be a bit careful when you are sanding stuff. You need to sand in the direction that the wood is actually growing. Otherwise it's gonna look like complete crap. So you're not gonna go and sand from, in this case, from top to bottom or like that. You need to sand, in this case, from the right to the left, just so that the result in the end will actually look nice. Otherwise, it's just not gonna look nice. You don't need to sand it all the way. You can just do it surface-wise, since you're just renewing some stuff in this case. Having a wet towel would be nice. But okay, this works too. So I'm just going to clean the surface up a little bit so we can see the progress and see if there are still some big scratch marks, like right here. But yeah, and this is the old varnish, as you can see. Surface-wise, this already looks a lot better, but we still have some scratches in this area, so I'm going to try and clean that up. I mean, it's okay if it has a little bit of wear on it, and again, this is the back plate, so no one's really going to see that. So it doesn't have to be as pristine as the front, but I want to do a decent and nice looking job, so I'll try and get rid of those scratches in here as well. And they're almost gone, just one tiny one left here. But yeah, that looks pretty much gone. So yeah, I could sand it a little bit more since we can still see that there's some varnish left in these areas, so I'm gonna do those as well. It's gonna be just fine. So now the corners are left. You have to be a little bit careful with those. Well, I shall probably get the vacuum. This is getting really dusty. When you're sanding, you have to make sure that the corners here don't get really sharp, and if they do, just angle this thing slightly and go over it 2 times by changing the angle a little bit every single pass, and the corners now should be nice and smooth. They should not be able to accidentally cut you. So yeah, I'm just gonna get the vacuum, clean this area up a little bit, and then we can start applying the varnish to this. Let's do something on this. Oh, goodness. Okay, and we are done. So now I have to leave this to dry for about 10 hours. It will be dry so to the touch in about half an hour or so, or 10 minutes, something like that. But yeah, now to clean out the brush and let this sit. I still have to figure out how to remove this piece of plastic, since I haven't seen any visible or direct indication on how I can actually remove that. These metal bars in here, I can remove those fairly easy. They are just clipped in. You can wedge a screwdriver or something from the side and very, very carefully pull them out. They're essentially just a spring. Stuff on the back. I probably won't be able to remove this. But the battery case, I think it's screwed in. Yeah, it's screwed in. So removing that is also no problem. So, about an hour has passed and that has dried very nicely. It looks great. Almost looks like a completely new piece. So now I'm gonna focus more on the radio itself. I actually found out how this plastic bar up here gets removed. There are some slidey pieces of wood wedged in between each side, inside of the radio as well, and that somehow holds the entire thing in place. It's kind of weird, but yeah. Now, the difficult part is well, also trying to get that thing back in, since the radio itself is in not so great shape, and as you can see, there's some big cracks in here, and there's a nice big crack in here as well. Let's see if we can get a good look at that. There we go. And you can see that there opens up pretty widely. Now, at least most of the stuff is still holding together, so that's not going to be an issue. And there's also this piece here which is very, very loose. Now I have some wood glue, a lot of wood glue, more than I'll probably ever need. So yeah, what we have to do is try and open this without breaking it, and get as much wood glue in there as we probably can. No, well, not too much, but you kind of want it to come out of the sides a little bit, but also not too much at the same time. And since this has like pressure on itself, since it actually wants to hold together, I don't think we'll actually need a clamp for that. It would be better to use one, but I'm pretty sure it's going to be just fine without. Now then there's this piece. I'm just going to pull that off, since it's already pretty broken and loose. For that I'm just going to put a very, very small amount of wood glue on there. It really does not need a lot. Since this stuff is really strong when it has actually dried. And see if I can get that on there properly. Oh yeah. But I will probably need a clamp for that. Now for this, my idea is to try and open the wood as much as possible and squirt as much wood glue in there as well. I'm doing this all before I'm actually starting to sand anything. Well, I mean, if I would sand first and then apply the glue, then it would just ruin everything, since I would have to sand it again. So yeah, now just trying to fill in all those cracks with some glue. And afterwards clean up as much as possible, but also make sure that those cracks are all nice and closed. It's fine if there are cracks, as long as they're filled with something. And if you really wanted to, you can add wax with the same color on the remains of those cracks. But I don't think that's going to be necessary, and it's probably also nicer to have at least something to show for that at some point repair was attempted at this. And the glue turns transparent when it's, well, almost transparent when it's dry. Just a little bit there. Like so. So this is flowing all nicely into that crack. It's going to fill that up nicely, and it's going to strengthen that piece as well again. Now I'll see if I have a clamp somewhere, just so we can clamp this other small thing here down. And I'll try to make that as good as with the original. Currently I really don't need to do anything in terms of protecting the surface, since I'm just going to sand it down. But if this were like the final piece, of course I would add something on both sides of this clamp just to make sure the surface doesn't get damaged. Okay, first of all, tighten it loosely so you have still the possibility to adjust that piece of wood. Make sure it's as identical to the other side as possible, and then tighten it up nicely. It's also gonna close the crack a little bit in here, and if I have another clamp, I'll put that on as well here, and make sure that there's some pressure on this section as well, which is always good when gluing stuff, but always, like in this case, not always necessary. That stuff is really so strong. And yeah. Just getting some remaining glue out of here so that I can actually reinsert the plastic panel without any problems. Okay, now since this is the front piece of the radio, or at least the thing you will always be looking at, I kind of want to do a bit nicer job than I did with the rear section. Since, well, you're not going to look at the rear section that often, and to do that, since I've now sanded this with 120 grit sandpaper, I got a wet cloth, and I'm just going to go over all the areas that I sanded, just to get the wood a little bit moist. And what this is going to do, it's going to lift up the fibers of the wood, and if I go over this again with 200 something grit sandpaper, I've got 240 grit lying around, so I'll use that. It's going to make an even smoother surface, and when I apply the varnish, you will not have a rough surface because the fibers that would lift off are already gone, just from this step. And you can feel if this already worked just after like applying the water, letting it dry for about 10 minutes or so. You will feel that the smooth surface you have just sanded is really, really rough after the water has dried. And again, you don't need to use a lot of water, just a very slightly moist towel is more than enough. You don't want to soak the wood, you just want to very gently apply some moisture to it, and that's it. There we go. Oh, that's just some wood dust. And yeah, if you already feel the surfaces, they are much rougher now than they were before. So now I can change the sandpaper I was using before over to this one, which is 240, and sand all of that again. But I have to let it dry entirely first. So, now we are at the missing piece, which I've made a new one. Well, at least as good as I can get it. Now, the other problem is that this is hardwood, and this entire radio is built out of a plywood, which has been coated with some other wood to make it nice and fancy, which I have also got, hopefully, the correct type for. So, I need to cut this to shape and glue it on top of here, and then glue this entire thing onto here. Now I have glued the correct wood on it, and it looks great. Now all I have to do is glue it on here and make sure that the gap on this side and on this side is almost not visible. So yeah, and well, doing that is going to be a little bit of a challenge. But let's apply some glue to this, and see it how it turns out. I'm just gonna, after that, secure it with tape. I'm not going to use a clamp or anything since I don't want to damage this piece. It's small and really fragile. So avoiding all damage on it as best as I can is the best option. And there we go, just like that. And the glue needs about 10 or 20 minutes to dry. I mean, it's like 20-30 degrees down here, so that's fairly warm. And the glue dries pretty fast. So yeah, let's see how that turns out. If there's a small gap left, that's not a real problem. I can just fill that gap with wood glue, and it's gonna be just fine. Alright, some sanding and applying varnish later. There we go. This still needs to dry. But so far, it looks really nice. The corner here, you can see the color and everything matches. Make sure you have the bright side on the inside, but that doesn't really matter since that's not visible from the outside. But the section that's on the outside, as you can see, the color matches and everything. So that's pretty much how exactly it should be. So yeah, now let this thing dry. Paint the two remaining corners, which are here and here. Those are facing down, and then the case is gonna be done. So, since the wood is now done, there are a few other things I wanna fix before I actually reassemble this. Of course, I'm gonna clean this really all out. It has some nice cigarette residue in it, which is just fucking disgusting. But yeah, whatever. Now, the radio also had this little needle here, or this meter really, I don't really know how to call that thing. Now this was to indicate whether you either tuned into a station properly or as well show your battery level. But since this thing has been banged around quite a bit, this decided not to work anymore. Well, I just found out that you can see that the entire construction is pretty much a ring that's pressed into a piece of plastic. And that has slid out of the plastic, and all I've had to do was just push it back in, glue it together with some super glue, and then test it, see if it works, and you can see the needle moves. I should probably hook up some power to it, but yeah. Needle moves, so that's fine, because it didn't move before. And it will also move with the cover on, since it was rubbing against the cover, and of course, in that case, this tiny needle with barely any like real large magnetic forces behind it cannot move. So that's fixed as well. So yeah, on here I'll just need to do the regular contact cleaner method, cleaning out all the potentiometers and switches, since those are all a bit noisy. Also gonna clean up all the potentiometers on here and make sure that they all go back into their corresponding position. I'm not going to fiddle around with anything that has to do with these metal cans, since in there are the tuners and whatnot. And if you misalign those, then you're gonna have a really bad day, and essentially the radio will not be able to find a station anymore. So I'm just not gonna touch that at all. And the tuning dial, well, still works perfectly fine. So that's nice. So the case of the small needle meter has been put back together and glued together with some super glue, like it was done before. And now it's back mounted and soldered up to the correct wires. So let's see if it works. It has a little bit of a delay behind it, but I just think that's the radio itself. But you can see that it's definitely working. And when switching to a station, you can see it twitch very slightly to indicate if you either found a station or not. I'm probably not going to find a station down here since, yeah, there's pretty much no radio signal. But yeah, 9 volts are hooked up to this thing, it even goes into the green area, so I guess that is good. So, well, as you can see, I've started to reassemble the radio, but I've encountered a new issue. Everything works, just not the radio. So, whatever is related to the radio only comes out the speaker super quiet. And the reason for that is, well, the radio signal goes to the cassette module, presumably so that the audio can be picked up by the cassette if you do like a recording or something, then goes back onto this circuit board and into the amplifier down there, all through this 9-pin plug or so. Now the issue is the radio goes in, but it does not return. There's this one pin over here, which should be that one. And this is where the radio should be coming back and go into the amplifier. Only issue is it only goes in and it does not come out. So what's happening? Well, we can take a look at the schematic. And I've highlighted that in green, where the signal from the radio is going to the cassette module through an internal switch, and I guess that is where the issue is. Or we just have a break in the cable somewhere, because as you see, it's supposed to return, and if you press play on the cassette, these two positions here get swapped, and you get audio from the cassette instead of the radio. Pretty simple and straightforward, but apparently there lies our issue. I mean, the cassette works fine, so I can adopt this that switch, and I presumably think that's more of a other issue, but yeah, I don't know. Let's try and find out. Now, I've bridged that connection myself with these two, with this crocodile clip cable, and if I tune through the radio, I'm just going to do it real fast so I don't get a copyright strike here. You should be able to hear that. That is working now just fine. Can't play too much of that music though, since I don't have my own radio station to broadcast the YouTube audio library, and it's probably also illegal. So yeah, let's see what has happened. I mean, I've checked this plug and everything seems to be fine there, but I mean, I could be wrong and something is causing issues there. And so far as it looks, it's really this switch here, which is this one up here. The tape recorder actually presses on that, and if you hear that, the radio is playing if I gently press it. So there are some issues in terms of contact with this thing. I mean, just look at how fucking dirty that is. And also, yeah, these solder connections, they just broke when I was fiddling around with this thing. This is a really crappy switch. Let's see if I can do a better job trying to fix this thing than it was initially installed, since this is really not really not nice. Since yeah, the cables are so short, there's a lot of tension on them. This could have been done so much better, but no. But yeah, I'm just gonna clean this up, fix the broken solder joints on it, and hopefully that's the end of it. Okay, so I fixed the issue with the switch, and I also did look inside the tape mechanism. Before I didn't want to mess with it because everything was kind of working fine, but I realized that the belt it was kind of cracked in some places, so I decided to swap that out with a different one. This is a bit of a bigger belt since I didn't have anything that thin, but hey, it fits, so it's probably just going to be fine. Now forward, rewind, everything work, because those two were the ones that didn't work before. As you can see, everything fine there. So, now since I have put in a different belt, the unit actually seems to run a little bit faster. And I have to adjust the speed of the motor with that tiny potentiometer down there. Let's get a close look at it. It's that one. This should be the potentiometer to adjust the speed, since that's where the motor connects to. Now, in order to actually know if you are using the correct speed, you can do two things. For one, you can listen to it, which is a bit inaccurate, and the other option is using an oscilloscope. I'm going to use an oscilloscope because that's a little bit more accurate, and I have one all the way back there. Come on. It's just a crappy Chinese kit, but hey, it will show me the frequency and it's pretty accurate. Okay, so all I have done is I hooked up the oscilloscope to the speaker to get a bit of a bigger signal than using the line-level audio. So let's press play. Turn up the volume. And we're having sound issues again. Great. Well, the cassette is not moving. That's the reason why. Don't know why. There we go. Let's lower the volume a bit so the oscilloscope can actually pick that up. If you look back there all the way, you can see we'll just barely make out a small sine wave. And that's actually pretty close to 1 kilohertz. Let me get you a closer look at that. There we go. So up there in the left corner you can see that it's almost at exactly a kilohertz. I think that's pretty accurate. I could mess around with it a little bit, but I kind of doubt I'm gonna get it any better than it is already. But yeah, I can do it anyways, just so you know what to do. The screwdriver is too big. It's too big as well. There we go, let's see. As you can hear, by adjusting this, the frequency changes. And you can see that the entire assembly is actually running much slower. Turning it the other way, you can hear it's running much faster. It's at 1.2 kilohertz now. Turning to the slowest, we have about 600 hertz. So we want almost as accurate as we can 1 kilohertz on this. And there we go, that's even more accurate than before. So yeah, as you can see, that's a little bit more accurate than before, so I'm just going to leave it at that. And that's how you adjust a cassette recorder the easiest way possible with crappy Chinese oscilloscope and a 1 kilohertz calibration cassette. Now, the issue is you could probably buy a calibration tape like this. I actually made this one myself from a tape recorder which I knew was in fully working order. It wasn't new and calibrated, so I just recorded a 1 kilohertz sine wave on this. And that's what's played back, and if there's any misalignment, this will show you exactly what's going on, if it's too fast or too slow. Oh yeah, and by the way, I'm actually redoing the wiring, because these cables that were used in the stereo, they are fucking shit. If you try to remove the insulation from these, I mean, okay, I'm not using a very professional tool for this, but just my slightest attempt at just getting the insulation off. Well, in this case, it's actually, yeah, it just rips off the copper because the copper strands in there are so thin. If they are even copper, not copper-coated aluminum. But I cannot doubt that this would have been done in a stereo of this age. So yeah, they just were a bit greedy with the copper they used. But yeah, I have a bunch of different cables lying around from printers and whatnot. So I'm just gonna redo the wiring entirely, and that should solve that issue. Already done it, just have to clean it up nicely. This is not fun at all. Damn. Everything works perfectly fine if I use the battery power as a power supply. But then I'm using just a switch mode power supply set to 9 volts, which this thing is supposed to receive. But as soon as I plug it in, everything sounds like complete fucking garbage. Yeah, even the same with the radio. At least there's a lot of distortion on there, but mostly with the tape recorder as well. So my guess is that there's another fault in the power supply. I have already replaced the fuse with the correct one, since the fuse that was in it was a 1 ampere one, and the one that's supposed to go in it is only 100 milliamperes. So what the fuck? Yeah, so it seems like I have to try and get that power supply out of there, make sure it's actually working correctly, which I'm pretty sure it's not, and figure out how to fix that. This is fucking annoying. I was hoping that I could finally put this thing to rest, but no. The final thing I wasn't even considering to have a fault, which was the power supply, of course, had a fault. Damn it, there was nothing wrong with the power supply actually. I've messed around a lot with it and I didn't get anything to work. Even using a different transistor just didn't change anything at all. Well, guess what? The power supply is completely fine. The issue is just the cable I'm using. Yes, seriously. The mains cable I'm using. Now, since this plug, which is in here, is a little bit different than the standard they used in the GDR back then, it had a bit of a clip or so on it, or a overextending piece, which would activate this switch deep in there. That one. Come on, focus. And since that switch is not being activated, everything sounds like complete trash. So yeah, nothing was wrong with the power supply, just some stupid switch which I didn't know about. Now, since I probably am not going to be able to find a fitting power cord for this, I'll try and hack in an additional switch that I can just activate if there are any issues when using this device, because I think that's a little bit better than trying to find the correct cord for this. But yeah, I mean, I've tried to find that cord, and there are like some crazy sellers online who will try to sell you a power lead for just like 30 euros. Like, what the fuck? No. So yeah, adding an additional switch is probably the best option. Sometime later, and everything is nicely back together, and everything works exactly like it's supposed to do. So that's really nice. Radio works just fine. The cassette recorder also works just fine. And no matter what I use, if it's now the 230 volt inlet or the 9 volt battery supply, everything works. It just really was that stupid switch which was kind of hidden out of the way, and I didn't see at first. But yeah, now to solve that issue, I've actually done something a little bit different. And that is to add an additional switch in here that just bypasses the entire function of the switch that's in the power supply. Just so that I at least have the option to use a different cord, since there's probably no way I'm going to obtain the original cord for this thing, since, yeah, it's also kind of necessary. Now there were some other issues. This radio has this plastic plaque on the top here. This is the piece I replaced. It looks great. And this plastic piece is held in with these metal clips. One was missing, unfortunately, and I couldn't find it. I found one which was in the radio, which we saw in the front here, and 2 others were somehow holding this thing still in. But I just could not figure out how these are supposed to hold this thing on. No matter where I checked online, I could find anything. So yeah, it could have also been that all of these are broken and they had some clips actually holding these on, and that just by screwing this thing together, it would squish everything nice and tightly, and that's it. But that seems kind of weird. So I opted for a different approach and just swapped out these with 4 screws and 4 3D printed pieces of plastic that have a threaded insert in them, so that this thing is just screwed on as soon as you have the rear panel on. Yeah. Now I'll probably have to realign this antenna here. As you can see, it's not centered there properly. Don't know why. And I'm missing 2 knobs. One is for the tuner, and no, I cannot use one of these. because, well, they do enter, but they are just a tiny bit short. So, yeah, that's kind of odd. And, yeah, I'm probably just gonna 3D print something, use some aluminum tape or pink paint, or silver paint, and that should do it. And also the 2 metal strips in the front are still missing. I have to clean those and add them. So, some more progress. I've cleaned up everything as good as I can. But yeah, I will definitely repaint all those buttons, because they kind of look gross. This is how they looked after cleaning. I mean, there was some disgusting gunk on top of them. Probably like from all the cigarette remains or whatever the guy had on his fingers, and this stuff does not come off. So painting is the only option. I had the same issue with the cover of the cassette recorder here. And yeah. And the corner I replaced, it looks great at least. But you can definitely see that some repairs have been done there. The color isn't quite the right one. But at least it's better than just having an open gap in there. And well, this radio is also kind of old. So, of course, the wood darkens, and this is a new piece, so it's going to be brighter. The crack over here is like, it's barely visible. You can see it if you take a closer look. But other than that, it's not something that stands out anymore, which is nice. So, I also had to replace the original mounting system for this piece of plastic here. The plastic panel, because I could not figure out how the old system was supposed to mount, and since I cannot find like a service manual properly for this thing, yeah, I just replaced it with something a little bit better. So yeah, why the hell not? Got everything aligned now, and as you can see, I have printed 2 pieces here, which are supposed to replace the original buttons. The power switch, I'm probably going to leave that as it is in black, all it is. It also has a nice indent in it, like the other switches do, and it does turn on. The one for the tuning, it was, taking a look at some pictures, it was similar to these, but only a little bit longer and quite a bit thicker, sort of like the thickness of these, but with the same height. So yeah, I've just printed that, and this is the first piece that I've had that actually fit properly. Getting the dimensions of the shaft in there is a little bit difficult, but and well, you have to be kind of precise with the tolerances of the printer as well, since the printer has like an accuracy of 0.3 millimeters, somewhere about there. Yeah, it's kind of hard to get that exactly right, so that needed a few attempts. Probably just gonna paint this black afterwards, and after that add like a silver layer of paint around it, or just use aluminum tape, whatever works best. But yeah, also other good things. I finally found my YouTube audio library cassette, which is over here, and we can now actually listen to some music on this thing without it causing me any copyright issues. So yeah, here we go. And the cassette is stuck. That still happens sometimes, I don't know why. But yeah, usually it fixes itself if you press fast forward quickly. Or not. So I don't know what's causing that. I have investigated that quite a bit, but I cannot figure out why it's stopping. Probably it's the capstan, which is not super clean. I will check that thing as well. But I have already cleaned out the entire cassette unit, so I don't know why it's still getting stuck. Probably the capstan. But hey. At least it works. Sound is decent enough. You can't expect a lot of audio quality from this thing, since, well, it's a pretty old amplifier. And yeah, it doesn't even have like a really decent amp in it. So yeah. But hey, it's okay. Now, there's still one piece missing, and that is the side panel over here. I'm probably going to print that in gray plastic and afterwards paint it black, since everything else on this radio is black as well. And this is just more like a test piece I made to make sure that all of my dimensions are correct. And they are, except that this one is a little bit misaligned. It needs to go a millimeter over there and a millimeter down. It's not perfectly center. So, yeah, that's being printed right now. So, yeah. Other than that, it fits perfectly. It has the same rounded edges like the previous, like the original piece. So yeah, and it's great that I removed the functionality with that switch, because just finding that stupid original cable is going to be a real annoyance. All right, and we are done. Yes, the stereo is entirely completed. Everything sounds great. Everything works great. I have working knobs again. I haven't cleaned those up yet. I'm going to do that later, but not show it, because yeah, it's just some cleaning up and painting them. Just sticking some paint, some tape over the silver parts in here, just so no black paint gets on there. Of course, I have to remove them all one by one. But yeah, so I'd say that's a complete success. A trash stereo, all nicely worked back up. I have also replaced that cover now. It was really fiddly to get those dimensions in here properly, but as you can see, everything fits just nicely. So yeah, thank you for watching and goodbye.